Will Antonio Pierce get the opportunity to be the permanent head coach of the Raiders? Some tough talk recently from Max Crosby, who really wants him there, Miles. And the fact that the Raiders have now put the ball on the tee, they've done all the interviews that they have to do to comply with the Rooney Rule. They are the first team, other than the Patriots, who were able, because of contractual arrangements that circumvent the Rooney Rule, frankly, they were able to hire Gerard Mayo right away. The Raiders are now in a position where they can hire anybody at any time, and everyone's wondering, are they going to give Antonio Pierce the job?
It seems like that's the way the wind is blowing in Las Vegas, certainly, with Antonio Pierce being named head coach and then Champ Kelly probably being named as the permanent GM. And, I think Antonio Pierce earned the opportunity to do it, going 5-4 with that roster and with that team completely changing the culture from what Josh McDaniels had set in the preseason to what we saw at the end of the season. I understand why Mark Davis would be inclined to keep that. That to me is almost more impressive than the job Rich Bisaccia did, keeping that team together and then advancing to the playoffs, keep giving the Cincinnati Bengals all they could handle back in 2021, in part because things were so bad under Josh McDaniels, right? That you had to completely reset everything. And Antonio Pierce embodies the Raiders. He does it very well. I think that hire makes sense. I mean, it could happen as soon as today, right? So if there's one team that we can look for to make a move today at head coach, I think it would be the Raiders.
And I was saying throughout the final weeks of the regular season that Mark Davis needs to learn from the mistake he made last year, or 2 years ago, when he didn't keep Bisaccia and Mike Mayock after they led the team through some pretty dysfunctional times. You failed then, you get another opportunity where interim GM and interim coach are getting it done at a more than acceptable level. Are you going to fail this time? The problem, though, is you got to resist the temptation to make a beeline for Jim Harbaugh, or now that Mike Vrabel's out there. The word on the NFL streets over the weekend was, when you start connecting dots, Vrabel to the Raiders. Tom Brady, intimately involved in the team, even though his attempt to purchase 5 to 10% of the franchise is yet to be approved by the owners, and it might never be, but he's involved, and he and Vrabel are tight. And Vrabel, when I first saw, Vrabel to the Raiders, it's kind of, kind of like the sound of that. So will Mark Davis hold firm with what we feel like Antonio Pierce has deserved, or will he become tempted to make a bigger splash with a Jim Harbaugh or a Mike Vrabel? And the thing is, now that the Rooney Rule's been fully complied with and they can hire anyone at any time, Jim Harbaugh could show up today and he could hire Jim Harbaugh today if he wanted to. And Antonio Pierce could end up coaching somewhere else. In the rough matchmaker thing we did, it was Pierce to the Titans, which I kind of like the sound of that. And maybe Pierce to the Falcons. If Bill Belichick doesn't go to the Falcons, who's going to get that job? Antonio Pierce there. Antonio, this is the anti-Jeff Saturday. Even and Pierce at least had been coaching with the Raiders and had coached at a high level at Arizona State. But he doesn't have an extensive coaching resume. But he got the opportunity, and it worked. That's what we were talking about earlier with Ben Johnson. You go into that job, you either got it or you don't. And we saw pretty early that Antonio Pierce has it. And others have noticed. That's the difference, too. It's not like Rich Bisaccia all of a sudden ended up on coaching interview dance cards all throughout the NFL, although maybe he did and I'm just forgetting. But this idea that Pierce is a real candidate in Tennessee and possibly a real candidate in Atlanta, that may be enough to get Mark Davis to say, man, wow. I mean, if I let this interim coach go, not only is there no guarantee whoever I hire is going to be better, I'm going to have to witness Antonio Pierce ascend to become a great head coach with someone else.
Well, no doubt. And, he's going to bring the attitude. He's going to bring the swag wherever he goes. The one thing that I think is at least a question, and I'm not trying to make this a negative. It just is. It's a question that you'd ask any head coaching candidate. Who are your coordinators going to be? and what is your vision for what this thing should look like, right? And that specifically applies to the offense because, look, the Raiders defense greatly improved over the course of the season. Patrick Graham did a great job with that unit. I'm sure Antonio Pierce is very involved in that as well. But, when it comes to the offense, it's not like this is a team that was all that fantastic unless they were playing the Chargers on Thursday Night Football and embarrassing the other team, right? I mean, the week before they had just gotten shut out by the Vikings. So let's see what they're able to do at offensive coordinator. Who's going to be able to come in? Is that Bo Hargree? Is he going to still be there? What is the plan? What does your vision look like for a quarterback? What does your vision look like for an offense? That's something that I am really interested in because, when you adapt what you already have into having when you're an interim coach, like that's one thing. And that's why it's so impressive to me because you didn't envision what this was when the offseason was happening, but what is the vision for the offense going forward? I think that's something that's going to be really interesting to see if Antonio Pierce does in fact get this job or any job.
Before we break, can we put the graphic up again that had the various coaches of the Raiders over whatever period of time it was? That's depressing, right?
Yeah.
And you look at the folks who managed to get above 500, or at least not be woefully under 500. It was Pierce as an interim coach. It was Rich Bisaccia as an interim coach, and then a little dust up above 500 a few years before that. But man, it's been a rough 20 years for the now Las Vegas Raiders. And this could be, if they get this right and Antonio Pierce can continue the trajectory that we've seen, they could have something special there. We'll find out. All right, let's take a break. The Saints making a surprising change, Myles Simmons, on Tuesday. We'll talk about that when PFT Live continues right after this. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.